Well, hello, everybody. This is Michael Harper, and I am excited to be hosting Experience Friday live today. Sean has the day off, and we will move without him today, but we have a great show and a great guest lined up. So we'll jump right into it. Do you want to always start with why the heck experience matters? And today, I think my focus is you know what? You're going to have experiences no matter what. You can either make something great out of those experiences or you can ignore those experiences and they'll get the best of you. But either way, the experiences are going to happen. So experiences matter because if we can harness them, if we can leverage them, if we can make them into something that's amazing for people, then we're able to make a business case for increased revenue, for decreased attrition of your teams, employee happiness. All those things come to mind. If we ignore it, we've got a lot of people that can be upset. Our revenue goes down, our retention rates go down, everything goes down. So that's why experiences matter. Make sure if you are listening before we bring our guest in, please add to our chat. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what questions you have, and we'll bring them to the show. So today we have a really great guest. Let me flip over to the introduction for him. Gary David earned a PhD in sociology from Wayne State University in 1999, and since that time, he has worked as a professor of sociology at Bentley University, a private business university outside of Boston. There, he teaches courses in applying sociology and sociological insights across a variety of topics. He's taught on social environments on the school's flagship MBA program. He currently teaches in the nationally recognized master's program in human factors and user experience, where he teaches a course on ethnography and experience design. In 2017, he was awarded the status of certified clinical sociologist for his work using sociological insights to develop and design interventions to promote positive change. He's worked with clients in a variety of domains, including software development teams, clinical documentation, product production and use, interrogation and interview analysis, and cultural training. So let's welcome to the show, Gary.
Hey, Michael. Every time I hear that intro, I'm like, I gotta shorten the intro. It's like, God, who's this? I mean, it's a lot, but I
It is a
appreciate you
lot.
reading it.
Yes, and I read it before we started and thought, we could shorten this. And I thought, no, it's such great stuff. We're just going to go with it. So everyone could really get to know you. So welcome,
Right.
welcome. And you are
Thanks.
in the Boston area this morning, right?
I am. Yeah, I'm outside of Boston in my live streaming studio that I created shortly after the pandemic when we had to all up our online game. Not all of us. Some people are still doing the up the nose view from their laptop camera. But for the rest of us, we're trying to improve our online experiences. And so I'm at my home with my daughter who was just diagnosed with COVID and a
Oh,
barking dog. She's fortunately doing well, and it's not, she's been boosted and everything, but it's things go on, even though to the people's proclamations to the contrary, we're still dealing with it, and it's
we
going to be
are.
hard to know for how much longer.
Yeah, it is. It is. So let's jump right in
Sure.
with getting to know you a little bit. I would love to know, why do you do what you do? We heard what you did and what you're
Right.
doing, but why do you do what you do, and how do you keep motivated to do it? I know that you've got a lot going on, and I'm just interested in knowing what keeps you going.
Sounds like you've been talking to my wife. Why do you
Uh
do what you do? No, it's why do I well, I mean, I've always been interested in well, that's not true. From the first time I had a sociology class, I was interested in it because I wanted to help people. I wanted to go to college, be a clinical psychologist. And I took my first sociology class and I was like, wow, you can actually scale helping people. You can help not just individuals, but you can help groups. And sociology seemed like the best way of doing that. It's going back to the seeing the big picture. It's to seeing the system. It's to seeing the complexity, not being thrown off by it, but actually being intrigued by it, by wanting to understand it more, and then being able to find ways of translating that. So academics can be very good at the understanding, not so good at the translation.
right.
So then, I've been fortunate enough for all of my academic programs and where I teach now to be in very applied programs that the professors were very much about what can you do with this to help people out. And that was undergraduate at Central Michigan, PhD at Wayne State, and now working at a private business school of Bentley University, which might be the oddest place for a sociologist to be. But as I tell folks, if you're interested in making change and having impact, there's no better place to be than a business school.
It is, and if it truly is working on applied academics, right? Then
Sure.
there's that loop that is so fun when the people that you're working with are out working somewhere or interning somewhere, and they can bring you current information that the class can talk about, and then spit it back out, and then add the scholarship on top of it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I didn't, when the reason why I ended up at Bentley was because it was the only place to offer me a job. And so that made it a choice. It's like, out of all the options you have, how did you choose Bentley? I'm like, oh, right, all the options. So they offered me a job, and I was like, a business school. I actively avoided business classes as an undergraduate. But I will say, oddly enough, my dissertation work was on intercultural communication in Arab-owned liquor stores in Detroit. And so before there was this thing called customer experience, I was studying what was called service encounters. And I was in liquor stores in the 1990s, looking at how people formed a relationship across the counter. And this is just after Rodney King and all of the riots that occurred after Rodney King verdict. And so I was studying workplace encounters and workplace interaction. But I wasn't doing it to improve business. I was doing it to understand the nature of social relationships across cultural divides. Most of Detroit is African American. Most of the liquor stores are owned by people from the Arab world, specifically Iraq. So it seemed like a good place to go. That morphed into studying software development teams that were distributed around the world.
Mm-hmm.
That morphed into looking at medical transcription and creating medical records and communication within those environments. That morphed into looking at interactions that occurred in police interrogation. So I've always been really interested in how to form better relationships in contentious environments. It just kind of happened that way, or environments that are supposed to be contentious, and how people build relationships. So then I do consulting work on call centers. How do we build rapport in these really quick interactions? How do we identify strategies and skills that using sociology and psychology and anthropology? How do we develop skills to turn contentious moments into connected moments? And so it's been like this interesting trajectory that wasn't intentional because there was no such thing as customer experience in 1996, but it ended up being a space in which I could work. And that's also now gone into patient experience, employee experience, learning experience, et cetera.
That's so interesting that you say that, because I grew up with a unhelpful mindset that business is bad. I didn't
Right.
really come up with a business family, and
Right.
they didn't teach me business was bad. I came to that to myself, that um, money, people that are just out to get money, are not good for the world in the
Right.
end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just been in later life, later career, that I've come around to, oh, no, 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 no. People need business to be able to connect and have salaries and money and an economy. It's how you steer that business that makes a difference. So it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of part of that journey too, of this really good here that can make a difference in how we interact with each other in a business world.
Absolutely. And so when I talk about this, I live stream on Twitch as Professor EXP, and I engage in a lot of conversations around business and organizational culture and experience design on Twitch. And I also, when I teach in the classroom, both at the MBA, the UX master's level and undergraduate level, business is what we would call a gloss, right? I mean, it's you have the mom and pop business in your town, and then you have, Wells Fargo or whoever, right? Some, Fortune 50 company. They're very, it's a business, but they're very different businesses. And it does go into this question about business for whom and for towards what ends. When people and then sociologists might say, when I do tell them I do consulting work with businesses, and they're like, oh, so you're trying to make businesses more profitable? I'm like, well, I'm certainly not trying to make them less profitable. I mean, should the goal be to the only good business then is the unprofitable business. It doesn't
Right.
make any sense. So
Right.
it's not a question of profitability. It's a question of what's done with that. My school is a nonprofit. It doesn't mean we run a deficit. We couldn't stay open with a deficit. We have to run a profit. But, being a nonprofit status means there's only certain things we can do with that profit. And so we're not just talking about profitability, we're talking about profit margin, profit at whose expense, for what purpose, and how to shift from a shareholder model to a stakeholder model, and how to use that stakeholder model in design to be more participatory and inclusive in our design, so that we're not just looking for the bottom line for ourselves, but we're looking for the social bottom line for everybody who is part of our experience ecosystem.
It's a whole nother topic there for another day, another show, right? Of nonprofits that just shoot themselves in the foot, right?
Yeah.
Themselves in the foot because they're not thinking like a business. They're thinking like an organization out to save the world instead of really thinking about how to make a difference from a business case,
And
right?
that's what's sneaky interesting about Bentley, and plugging Bentley here,
Please.
that we are, one of the things we do really well, and I will say that I'll tell you the things we don't do as well, but one of the things we do really well is we do a really good job at integrating arts and sciences and business. So I'm a sociology professor by training, who also is in a business department, who teaches business classes at the MBA level and the master's level, and who also does consulting work and does a podcast, Experience by Design podcast, where I talk to business people all the time, and they value that. So I'm bringing my sociological insights into the business world, not to change what sociology is, but to try to change what business can be. And Bentley as a school has always been about that integration, where most traditional universities, the sociologists never talk to the business people. Liberal arts or humanities is never part of business or
Right.
engineering or
Right.
science or math or medicine. The wicked problems we're facing today demand that we integrate knowledge and perspective to design better outcomes.
Yeah.
So that's what I think a smaller private school like Bentley does really, really well.
So let's get into our main topic for today, which is it was ethnoanalytics, and I
Yeah.
know that we have a Stoke to talk through. And
Oh, yeah.
ethnoanalytics, an approach to capture and understand the full complexity of your world. To make decisions, you need the best information. However, data without context is not accurately actionable. There's a lot of
Yeah,
A
I got to
words there,
rewrite that a little bit.
right? Data
Yeah.
without context is not accurately actionable.
So I can
Say
put it
more about
differently.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. So data does not equal information. You can have data system. Information systems are usually data systems. Information is something people make out of data by adding context. So the simple way I put it is data plus context equals information. Let me give you an example. The number of police in a community. Okay. So that could be a data point, the number of police in a community. What does that mean? What information is that? Well, what that means might be a matter of perspective and context. If the number of police in the community, if you look at it from the police perspective, they might be good because there's more jobs. If you look at it from a government perspective, it might be good because they feel like they're enhancing safety. If you look at it from the community perspective, it might be bad because they don't trust the police.
Mm.
So what is it might be a metric, but it's not an indicator. The indicator piece becomes important because by understanding what it indicates and to whom, we understand more about their experiences and their perspective. So ethnoanalytics is my name of my consultancy, is about combining big data and local context. It's about bringing those two things together. It's about combining qualitative and quantitative data and approaches to create a more holistic understanding about whatever it is we're interested in understanding. So that's what ethnoanalytics means. It's a term I created to talk about this notion of data plus context equals information. And going back to the issue of diversity, different people might bring different context. And so this is why it's really important. I talk about and I teach about and I consult on how to have data diversity. Not just diversity in the data you have, but diversity in the people who are looking at it. Because they're going to bring different experiences and different understandings to it.
So much to unpack here, right? We talk all the time about falling in love with the right problem.
Right,
And we hear all the time from folks in our consulting work.
right,
And I mean, a straight up quote is something like, we have all of this information and we spend all of our time getting all the data. um, we don't have time to really do any of the human centered design work or the
right,
innovation work that we're supposed to be doing. What should we do with all this information? And of
right,
course our quick response is, well, you need to throw it away.
right,
That's our quick response, is get rid
right,
of it. Like, you're done, move on.
right.
um, how do you coach people through that conundrum of just being completely overwhelmed with information?
So, I think they're overwhelmed with data, but they're trying to make information out of it that's actionable towards the goals they're trying to achieve. And I developed a 2-day workshop on qualitative data analysis. I teach it
Mm,
for Bentley and I do it for consulting and training. The reason being that people often get trained on how to collect data, especially qualitative data. They tend not to be trained as much on what to do with it. And so, as an ethnographer, as a person who studies culture, who uses a lot of qualitative data, there are techniques and approaches that can be used, especially as you get time on the tool, you develop expertise, in which you can get a pretty deep understanding from a limited amount of data. And so when we use a quantitative mindset, we need an end that's really big, right?
right.
And it's usually hypothesis driven. We have
Yep.
a
Yep.
problem statement at the very
Yep.
beginning. We're trying to
Yep.
prove, and
Yep.
it's like a scientific method. A more qualitative mindset revolves around investigation and discovery. A quantitative person might throw out an outlier. A qualitative person will be intrigued by it and try to
Right.
understand more.
Right.
And this is not
Right.
an either or, this is a yes and. And
Yep.
so going back to the ethnoanalytics, it's how do we bring that together in a way that is not, a dissertation length project,
Right.
but allows us in a way that's condensed to surface insights that are not just actionable for the immediate now, but strategic for the possible future. And that's where I think the qualitative data comes in, and the qualitative perspective is really important. It's that discovery, ideation, innovation, and creation that we get from these noticings.
So, do you have a suggested starting place for folks? I mean, I realize you have a whole,
Yeah,
system that you use and developed and teach. But to our listeners today, and
right.
they're overwhelmed with qualitative versus quantitative, and they've got maybe different people telling them to do different things and go a different way. What advice would you have for them as a starting place?
I think having what I would call an ethnographic awareness, and ethnography is an approach primarily found in anthropology, but also can be found in sociology, in which we try to understand culture. But
Mm,
really, ethnographic awareness is about noticings. It's about turning your senses into active engagement. So it's
mm,
looking into seeing, listening into hearing. And so Christian Madsberg wrote a great book called Sense Making on this. Christian Madsberg of Red Associates. And it's about actively engaging in the world in such a way that we can see insights in everything all around us. We can see potential. So now we're questioning, now we're thinking, now we're actively engaging. And that would be a first step, is how to turn passive senses into active experience
hmm
to make these noticings. I think the second thing is to diversify your data analysis. And by diversify, I mean across parts of the organization, not just the demographic diversity that we most often think about when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I, do a lot of work on at Bentley. I was one of the part of the team that started the first ever DEI major at a university. So
Great.
those things are important, but neurodiversity is important.
hmm
Age as diversity. There was a recent article, I think in HBR, Harvard Business Review, about why age should be a consideration in your diversity strategy. And so when you bring data sessions, and data sessions are something we do as academics, when you have data sessions, we want to make sure not to privilege analysis by position in the org chart. That we want to let people share and exchange to find what else can be talked about in the data than we are currently seeing by adding these different perspectives.
Wow, that's a lot. And then
Uh,
when we get to the actionable piece of all this, because I
Right.
love that you start with the need for action, that
Right.
data unto itself is not, I don't want to say it's useless, but isn't helpful in the way that it could be, right? So when you talk about putting it
Right.
into context and being able to create action, what are some of those actions that people watching today um, need to be able to be thinking about? If they are paralyzed with the information, what should they be dreaming about to be able to put that information into action?
One of the things I think that organizations often need but lack is aspirational leadership, right?
Hmm.
Where are we trying to go? Where are we trying to get to? And
Right.
so, data for what purpose? Data to what end? What are we trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to, is it a punitive tool that we use to identify who's not doing well? Are we, in the words of the author John Doerr, are we measuring what matters? Right?
Mm.
Are we allowing people to identify metrics that they value as important? Let me give a really quick example. Attrition rate. Usually people see attrition rate as a negative. People are leaving the organization, but it might be a positive. What if we're doing such a good job in training people that they're finding other opportunities in different companies, and that when they leave, they're actually advancing? That's a
Yep.
very different situation or
Yep.
problem than it is if they're leaving because the culture's bad. And what action you take might be very different. So rather than trying to stop them from leaving, maybe you form employee alumni programs
Hmm.
to
Right.
integrate them more into the life cycle of the organization. So you don't
Yep.
offboard them, you extend board them, for
Yep.
lack of a better word.
Yep.
It's a very different problem than we have a toxic culture that people are leaving for. So, like with the great resignation, people are leaving, they're not staying in the workplace. Well, why?
Exactly.
And can you get that from your dashboard, or you actually have to talk to people? Do you have to listen to what people are saying? Do you have to
Right.
kind of be around?
Right.
How do you integrate into your data stream, qualitative and quantitative data, to give you a better understanding, and then make a determination of what we should do based on what we're hoping to achieve? So using that data strategically and not in a reactionary way.
And then back to those people's voices, right? And just to people's voices. A shared passion of ours is human
Right.
centered design, right? One of the guardrails that we keep when we do any kind of human centered design sprint is there's got to be a weirdo in the room, or we'll
Right.
say a crazy person in the
Yeah. The
room, or an
outlier.
outlier in the
Yeah.
room, right? And seems like that fits into the micro aspect of this, right? If the macro is the big qualitative, big quantitative study, in the end, an actionable step is bringing that person's voice into the design process.
It's a bit tricky business because why is this person an outlier? Are they, because is it because they've been around long enough, they've seen enough where that they have
Mm-hmm.
great historical insight and organizational memory, and that you really want to capture, or are they kind of a
Mm-hmm.
pain, right? I mean, so they could be both, I guess. What is this person? What's at the source of their perspective? How do we include them if they're looking to be included? How do we leverage their unique position to inform what it is we're trying to accomplish? There's in sociology, we talk about deviance not as a necessarily a negative state. It's just a label. And in fact, one of the things I talk about and I teach about and I consult about is what I call deviant innovation.
Mm.
Okay. And so the idea that innovators, to be truly innovative, have to be somewhat deviant in that they're working against the norm. They're working
Mm-hmm.
against what most people think or do. And deviance is hard because you're on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old, it's Good Friday. There's an old Bible quote about, a prophet is never listened to in their own land, right?
Right.
And so and I just wrote a blog post about this, so it's on my mind. This idea of a deviant is, once they're labeled as a deviant, they're often excluded.
Right.
But sometimes that deviance can be the source of innovation that we
Yep.
might have to understand in
Yep.
order to create new ideas and pathways to accomplish whatever it is organization we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Absolutely. We could go on talking for a long time about all of
Yeah.
this, but I want to pay attention to time. And before we go, I want to make sure we get your take on trends. So we
Okay.
always want to ask all of our guests, what experience trends do we need to be paying attention to for 2023 and beyond? And beyond means a lot,
Right.
right?
I think the biggest trend we're going to see, well, I think there's a couple. One is the maturation of experience areas. So user experience has been around for a long time.
Yep.
It's hard just to plop into a UX job without UX training because it's matured to a certain point. I was just talking with someone from the Barrel Institute, which is on patient experience. PX has, matured. CX is starting to mature. Employee experience exists in HR, but it's also maturing in its own space. So we're going to see the maturation as academic programs become created or get created, along with organizations that do more credentialing. And this, the credentials become a
Mm-hmm.
barrier, right, to getting in. But the other thing, the big thing I think is, and this is why I talk about experience design, there needs to be an attempt to integrate experience channels. Because what can often happen in organizations is the UX might work against the CX, might work against the EX, might work against the digital, might work
Yep.
against the brand,
Yep.
et cetera, because they're not aligned. They're siloed. So
Yep.
it's going to take experience officers, not customer experience officers or user experience officers or employee
Right.
experience officers,
Right.
experience officers,
Exactly.
chief experience officers to integrate, or the CEO as chief experience officer. And this is why I just created a new course on introduction to experience design that's looking at the fundamental foundational components of experience, not in a particular industry, but as human beings. What we can learn from sociology, psychology, anthropology, the social sciences about what makes an experience, and how we come to terms with those as human beings. And then how do we understand that and leverage that to create integrated experiences?
That's
That's
huge.
that,
That's
that's going
huge.
to be that's going to be the biggest challenge, because I see it all the time. I'm sure you do too.
Hmm.
That UX wants to retain customers, CX wants to please customers. Well, they aren't necessarily the same thing.
No,
So,
no.
like, which one are we servicing here?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about experience ecosystems
Exactly right.
in our work of how to blend all that together and how to lose the word customer experience, which as a word person is really really hard because it all comes down to CX. But if you take the C out of the phrase, it changes everything,
And I would even
and it's hard to
say,
do.
when I talk, you can ask who's a user, who's a customer, who's a patient. What's an
Hmm.
experience?
Right,
Philosophy's only been knocking this around for 3,000 years. And
right,
so there is, again, academics don't translate well. So I'm working on a book with my co-host of Experience by Design called Experience by Design, where we're translating some of these deeper theoretical and philosophical conversations into experience design, accessible language.
fantastic.
Because experience, I mean, there's been a lot discussed about what constitutes an experience. And if you read it, it would give you a headache. But there's nuggets in there that we should think about when we're thinking about what constitutes an experience. How memorable does it need to be? How wow does it need to be? How effortless does it need to be? Maybe we need some friction. You know,
Exactly.
maybe we need to introduce less memorableness and more mundaneness,
Right.
right? How do we keep it simple? So rather than doing the big wow moment, reducing it to the seamless, effortless moment. And how do we prioritize and strategize what is best for when?
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you
Before
so
you head
much.
off, though, tell us how to contact you. What's the best way for our listeners and watchers to get a hold of you?
Well, I got like 4 business cards, but the easiest way would be through my Bentley email, probably gdavid@bentley.edu. You're always welcome to contact me there. For professional speaking, garyconnects.com is my professional speaking operation. Ethno-analytics.com is my consulting. And then you can always listen to Experience by Design podcast, experiencexdesign.com, or go to any place you get podcasts, type in Experience by Design, look for me and Adam, and you can check out our podcast there where we discuss experience designs of all kinds.
Love it. Love it. We'll look forward to staying connected and connecting with more people. And that's what I love about experience work is that the
Me
people
too.
that do it, it's not about intellectual property and competition. It's about coming together and
It really
creating great
is.
stuff. It's amazing.
Inclusiveness, integration,
Hmm.
and advancement for a good cause,
Exactly.
for a good reason.
And there's plenty of business to go around.
There
So
is.
that's not a scarcity for us. So
Well, thanks
So
so
if,
much,
if
Michael.
you'll hold on for a second, I'll wrap up the show and we'll talk to you after we finish.
Sounds good.
Want to say thank you to everybody and thank you to Gary for the time here together. We do have a few quick announcements. Next week on Experience Friday Live, we have Michael Baum from the Accenture. He's a manager of customer strategy at Accenture, so that'll be a good conversation next Friday, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We also have uh, our this is what we're going to be doing next week. Sean gets to speak at the Atlanta Experience Summit, and so if you've not connected with that, that's a really great opportunity to connect with there, and you'll see Sean. If you're in the Atlanta area, please go. And then finally, we have the chance to connect with us here at MOFI. You can grab us at mofi.co or any of our email addresses, including hello@mofi.co. And we're always looking for more guests. So if you know somebody or if you want to join us and have something to talk about, let us know. As we just talked about with Gary, it's just this opportunity to keep connecting with as many people as possible. So thank you so much for your time. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody, and enjoy whatever you have going on.